You're listening to the People's Podcast.
What do you do if you forget a lyric?
I keep stepping.
This is JSC Radio. This is the 90th episode, another landmark, the 90th episode of the People's Podcast. This is JSC Radio. Welcome back. J. Scott Smith here. Shout out to my man, of course, Doc Illingsworth, who produces the soundtrack for this podcast. Hit him up on the Twitter machine at Illingsworth. He's also on YouTube as well, where he does a lot of video gameplays, especially a lot of Tekken. Be sure to check that out on YouTube. Follow my man, of course, holla at Detroit City. He's a part of the three-man supergroup Detroit City. Shout out to them as well. They continue to show love. I want to big up everybody who listens across all the podcast providers: Apple Podcasts, iTunes, on SoundCloud and Stitcher, on Google Play and TuneIn, on Audio Boom, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Player FM, Radio Public, and anywhere else you get your damn podcast. I want to tell you to support the Patreon page. It's patreon.com/JSC Radio to get in on the ground floors. 2019 promises to be a whole hell of a lot better than what we had going on in 2018. I'll tell you that much. And I want to thank all of y'all who continue to support me across social media. That's at J. Scott Smith, JAYSCO, 2 T's, SMITH. The voice you heard there was from the brilliant Dr. Jennifer Caudle. As I mentioned in the first segment, we taped this interview back in late September, as originally episode 90 was slated to happen a lot sooner than it is. But, you know, we're still going to do it, as we're about to do it right now. And a little background here. She is not just a doctor you see on TV. Dr. Jennifer Caudle, I met her for the first time at a Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists meeting about a year and a half ago. She's an absolutely delightful woman, wonderful woman, gorgeous woman. She walks in the room, she carries herself with this presence to her that she's all business. But she's one of the genuinely nicest people that I've met here since I've come to Philadelphia. And she's just a great human being. And I had the opportunity to talk to her very briefly at another job I temporarily held earlier this year, but we had to actually get some time to talk together because I wanted to know more about her story. I wanted you guys to get more about her story. You've seen her everywhere. That clip you just heard was from one of her many appearances on Dr. Oz as she's talking about the perils of artificial sweeteners. She's been on every major network, all of them. You name it, she's been there. And for me to get time to talk to this woman, I felt it was not only my pleasure, I felt honestly blessed to be able to do it. And a cool little side note about this, I actually did the interview, as you will hear, sitting in her doctor's office, in one of the examination rooms. You know how when you go to the doctor and you sit on that little table and you prop your feet up? Yeah, picture the podcast studio going on the road and being set up in a doctor's office. These are the things I do for y'all. I hope you at least can appreciate what I'm putting in for you. Without further ado, we jump in the Wayback Machine and head back a few weeks, but it's still very pertinent to do it right now. Here's my interview with the good doctor herself, Dr. Jennifer Caudle. This is episode 90 of the People's Podcast, and this is JSC Radio. Let's head to the doctor's office. I'm sitting on the bed in the clinic. I've been in so many of these over the years. I didn't think I'd be doing an interview from here. I'd like to welcome to JSC Radio for episode 90, Dr. Jennifer Caudle.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, and thank you for that lovely introduction.
I do what I can. It's so interesting that this is the first time I've done interviews from interesting places. I've been in locker rooms. I've been on airplanes. I've been in buses. I've never sat in a doctor's office.
Never been in a doctor's office. Well, we're actually right now in one of my patient rooms, and yes, you are on the adjustable table that patients sit on. The blood pressure cuff is right next to you. For those of you who are listening, he's got an otoscope and all sorts of things, and so we're right here in the flesh. I'm
not used to having shoes on in rooms like this. Right. Once I get on here, I kind of set up and get comfortable. So there's so much to say, and I know you don't have a ton of time. But when I first talked to you, it was a couple months back at a previous place I used to work, and you mentioned something that first jumped off the page to me. You're a Midwesterner like I am. You're originally from Iowa. You're a little further out. You're a little further out. I mean, being from Michigan, I understand as soon as I see Iowa. So tell me about growing up in Iowa. You don't see a lot of I like to keep it real. You don't see a lot of us out in Iowa. So where in Iowa are you from, and what was that like growing up?
Well, no, you have a really good point. So I'm from Davenport, Iowa, which is right on the eastern border, about 3 hours from Chicago, right on the Mississippi River. So right across the river from Illinois. So that's to give you a little perspective. And you're right, there's not a lot of, I would say comparatively to other states, right? There's not a lot of black people in Iowa. But the other thing I say to people is a lot of times people outside of Iowa never meet Iowans, period.
True.
I think a lot of times people in Iowa, we kind of grow up, we're born, raised, we live and we die in the state of Iowa. So I don't always even think it's common just to meet an Iowan, let alone a black Iowan. But I often say too that there were more black people in my town growing up in Davenport than I think a lot of people would ever imagine. I mean, I had a really great community of friends. My family, we had friends and people that we grew up in church and things like that. It's a very strong African American community. So growing up in Iowa was actually quite wonderful.
And that's interesting because I'm a Big Ten guy. I went to Michigan State.
Yeah.
So normally when I see Iowa, it's usually Iowa Hawkeyes, and sadly the joke is like, are those the only black guys in Iowa? Are the ones playing for Iowa and Iowa State? And I thought about this, like I have seen some black people from Iowa. So. I know everyone has their own idea about those of us from the Midwest. Now, being from Detroit, it's slightly different because we're seeing big city, but you're no more than 30 minutes outside of farmland and open areas and everything else in Michigan. What was life like growing up out there in Iowa, especially knowing that part, having driven through that area, Illinois before, and knowing that region? It's a different life compared to being here closer to a city like Philadelphia.
It is a different life. And I think that one of the biggest differences that I think back on now versus what I see in other parts of the country was in many ways life was just slower. Now granted, I was growing up 30, 40 years ago, so it's not, maybe things have changed certainly, but the thing about it is I still think the pace is just different. And I have to be honest with you, the people, there's something about a Midwestern sort of friendliness, a Midwestern smile. Maybe we're a little bit trusting. I think I am. I don't know if that's from Iowa or if that's just who I am.
It's a bit of a Michigan thing too, I can tell you that.
It's a little, there's a little bit of a sort of a trusting nature, I think, to the people in Iowa, and also a giving nature. I mean, there's, I sometimes feel in other parts of the country that people meet each other with a little bit of skepticism first, like what do you want, or what are you doing, or what do you need, or what do you want from me. I feel like in Iowa there's a little bit of a difference where, oh, how can I help you? What do you welcome, come on in. Of course, I don't want to generalize and say that it's absolutely like that, but there is something about Iowa that people are friendly, the people are kind, the people are open. And I think in some ways more progressive than I think others might actually realize.
There is that misconception that it is very, and occasionally, yes, depending on where in the Midwest, it can be slightly different. I'm guessing Ohio is a little bit different from Michigan, which is different from Indiana and Illinois, Wisconsin, that whole region of the country. When you get out there, it is different. It is very different. It was like a culture shock, a bit of a culture shock to me when I moved east 3-4 years ago, where I had been kind of conditioned to think you're East Coast, you're going to be rude, they're going to be rude. They're not bad people out here, but they're caught off guard when they see somebody smiling, or they're a little friendlier or have a friendlier nature than that. Well, where are you from? Well, originally I'm from Michigan. That explains it. Right. And it's the same thing. It's like you're from the heartland of America.
Right.
Before I get into what led you into medicine, prior to this, you were also in, now I want to make sure, was it Miss USA or Miss America?
It was Miss America.
You were Miss America.
I was not Miss America, but I was.
You were in the Miss America pageant,
yes.
And I know that recently just passed, actually. So what was that like for you? What first drew you to pageant life, I guess, before you became a doctor?
Sure. Well, so I was Miss Iowa. I was Miss Iowa in 1999, and that's another thing I think people don't actually even think of Iowa. And I was Miss Iowa as an African American, and interestingly enough, I was not the first black woman to be Miss Iowa.
Really?
The first black Miss Iowa was Miss Iowa 1970.
Oh, wow.
Her name was Cheryl Brown. She was the first African American to compete at Miss America, and she came from Iowa. And that's one of the things I say when I mention Iowa being remarkably progressive, I think in ways that people don't understand. Our Miss Iowa this year, who competed in Miss America, was also of African American descent. We've had 5 women of color,
wow,
black women, identifying as black women, being Miss Iowa over the years. And not many states actually can say that, and we're from Iowa.
I can't think of Michigan being one of them. It's funny you bring that up. My former trainer is Carol Gist, who's the first black woman to win Miss USA.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know that about her because I just knew she was this woman who just wore me out. And she's like, you don't know who she is? Well, no. And I went and actually Googled her, and it's like, wow.
You're like, oh my gosh.
Like this, and she's so matter of fact and chill about it. And I think people often the misconception about women in pageant life is, oh, you're just these pretty women and they do the whole mocking of them. Oh, well, I have a platform that this, but no, a lot of women who are in these pageants are incredibly intelligent, very well, obviously, as I'm sitting in front of you right now, very well accomplished. Yeah. What drew you to medicine? Of all the different things, what drew you to medicine?
Well, medicine was actually my first love. And, to speak a little bit about pageants and medicine, I didn't do my first pageant until I was 20 years old.
Really?
I was already at Princeton. I was a sophomore at Princeton. I had gone home. I was going home for Easter and Christmas breaks and stuff from college. I was in Iowa at church, and this woman at church said, hey, have you thought about doing the Miss America system? It's scholarship money. Miss America, people don't understand, is the world's largest scholarship organization for women. They don't know that. And I needed money to pay for college and to, for all of this. My parents were teachers. So I actually got involved as a 20-year-old, my first time, for the scholarship money. And over the course of my pageant career, I say that with air quotes, I've only done 4 pageants. That was all. And it was really for scholarship and things like that. I think that my dream of becoming a physician started a lot younger. My family physician, who took care of my family at home in Iowa, he was an African-American physician, and he was amazing because he did like house calls. He would show up in the middle of the night, and doctors, we're not like that anymore.
This is really old school because I'm guessing we're both around the same age, and I probably, maybe by the early 90s, I don't even remember hearing too many doctors making house calls anymore.
No, house calls have really kind of gone by the wayside. And I'm an associate professor at Rowan University, and I'm a family physician, and I teach here. In our department, we have some family physicians that do house calls and geriatricians who do them. But I would say that it's really sort of a lost art. And he would show up in the middle of the night when my brother was having an asthma attack or, anything that we needed. And it was so amazing to see him kind of come over and pull out his doctor bag and all of his tools and things like that. It was inspiring. And to find out, and I think he was one of my earlier role models. So that's what really kind of shaped my idea. I just thought it was super cool what he was able to do.
And when you talk about that, my first doctor was Indian. And I actually was, I think I was 17 the first time I saw a black doctor. Yeah. And actually, I would see it on TV, but in real life, in person, I had just not seen any black doctors. They were white. They were Chinese, a lot of Indian. When I go back to Michigan, my mother ran into him. He was my pediatrician so many years ago. Really? I think his daughter is now a doctor too. It's amazing. But you just don't see too many black doctors. No. And why is that? What do you think that is that you don't see there's more now, but you don't see as many as there could be.
Well, this is how I feel in so many fields, right? I feel like I wish there were more black engineers, more black scientists, more black everything.
More black journalists. We always use more black journalists.
The thing about it is we probably all, in terms of our professions, have similar stories. There's, of course, a lot of reasons why, we don't have the same numbers of black physicians as we do people of other races. I think the biggest thing is to encourage young people to get involved and to strive and to reach for their dreams and to work hard, study hard, look for opportunities, and for the rest of us who are around young people to help provide opportunities and to help it. Mentorship is big. I'm guessing, you being a journalist, you might have had a similar experience with me in medicine. There were so many black physicians and non-black physicians that were the people who kind of really picked me up when I felt like I was down, that said, hey, no, keep going, you can do this, when I thought I couldn't. Who said, hey, have you heard about this program, this summer camp, this scholarship, when I didn't know. People that literally took me by the hand at times and led me to the path that I really wanted to go on. So, this is, I think, a word to myself, and for so many of us, we need to make sure that we're reaching back and helping others, kind of do some of the things that we knew that we wanted to do, and we know others do as well.
And you mentioned you are a professor. You have so many hats, and one of those is here at Rowan University, where we're doing this interview right now. Right. Before I go even into the TV aspect of it, what led you to teach? Because so many people, especially as accomplished as you are, what led you to go onto that end? Is it the feeling that you want to give back more and kind of help
help others along the way here?
Well, my parents are teachers, so I actually grew up in like a teaching household. You know, my brother and I, we used to call it school talk. You know, around the dinner table, my parents would talk about what happened at school that day. They would talk about my dad was a principal, my mother was a music teacher, and then later became a guidance counselor. And there was so much talk about education and educational programs. My parents are retired now, but still, when they see a yellow school bus driving down the street, you'd be amazed at how excited they get. They say, "Oh, Esther, there's a school. Oh, what is it? Elementary." They get so excited about school. So I grew up with this enthusiasm about education. So it made a lot of sense for me, even becoming a doctor, that I wanted to factor teaching in with it. It wasn't even really a decision. It was just, there was really no other option for me. I've only been in teaching and faculty positions since I graduated from residency because it made the most sense.
It's amazing, funny how you bring that up. My mother taught for almost 40 years in Detroit. Yeah. She taught high school, elementary school, and certain times of the year, it's still, because she retired maybe 10 years ago, and at certain times of the year still triggers certain things there, where when it gets around the middle of June and she says, this is the end of this, there you can tell this is the end of school year, because it's, in her bones. She feels it. Or even or even going back to early September is like, it's that time of year, because I still, even though she's been gone for, it's actually 14 years now, she still gets this itch to go back to a classroom. It's still there. She
feels it because it was, and I get that. It's still very much a part of who she is. I can understand that.
And you still, and you have that. You're able to balance all this out. Now, you do television. It was the first time I saw you were on TV, and I would see you on TV locally here in Philadelphia, but you do national stuff as well. How did you get your first spot on TV, and what drew you to kind of being the TV doctor? Because there's misconceptions like, oh, well, she's just a doctor on TV. It's like, no, she's actually a doctor who just happens to be on television. Yeah. And there is a difference there.
Well, I do think there is a difference. I am a practicing physician, so I see patients. In fact, the reason why we're doing the interview here in my office is because I'm starting office hours, in the next 30 minutes or so. So thank you for coming to my office to meet me here. I'm doing night hours tonight.
I aim to please. I'm more than accommodating.
I really appreciate it. But I am a practicing doctor, and I've always felt like in my adult life being on TV that if I'm going to talk about health on TV, I think it's important to do it. And I love that about being on television and talking about the latest studies and the latest things, because I'm seeing them really on a day-to-day basis, so it really informs what I do. I think I got interested in media work when I was Miss Iowa, because as Miss Iowa, I didn't win the title of Miss America, even though I really wanted it. As Miss America or Miss State, we call it Miss Iowa, you really travel around being an ambassador for different causes, and you speak at schools and at companies and corporations, and there's a lot of sort of communications work involved in that. And it was during that year when I came back to the state of Iowa and I worked for a year as Miss Iowa. I traveled 5,000 miles every month by car to schools, to, company openings, ribbon cutting ceremony, you name it. I mean, I was in cornfields, I did everything. I really learned how much I loved communicating. And my dream was always to become a doctor, but I had this second itch. I said, well, how can I mix communication with being a doctor? And it seemed perfect because I can talk to people about health. And I would say this, before I wrap up this answer, is that, when I see a patient in this office, you're in my office right now, one of the office rooms, you see the computer, the sink, the gloves, all the stuff here. Mm-hmm. I can only see one or two patients at a time. Two if it's a husband and wife or a parent and a child, but I only see one patient at a time. When I go on television or on the radio, I literally get to speak to millions. And that's amazing.
And what is that like, that experience like? Because I've seen you on The Doctors, and I've seen you do everything from Fox News, ABC. It's like, it does not matter the network.
Sure, yeah, I do a lot of networks.
How are you able to balance that while also seeing patients? I guess, what's a look at your kind of the balance of of work to media to just living your normal life?
Well, honestly, sometimes the balance is not that great. I'll be the first one to admit that I'm not the best at staying balanced, although it's always a work in progress and I always strive for better. But I'm usually seeing patients about 2 days per week, 2-ish days a week I see patients. I teach a course for medical students, 1 day a week roughly. And then the other times during the week, the other roughly 1.5 days, I'm doing media work. Sometimes my schedule has to flip-flop or change. Like even this morning, even though on Mondays, for example, I only work at night, I actually had some media things to do this morning, and so I was doing some videos, some health videos. So really, it's a lot of things. Sometimes there's weekend work. I do public appearances. I'm speaking this weekend at a health fair, for example. So I think that's one of the things I love about the job, love about what I do, is that every day is different. There's no 2 days are alike, I can tell you that.
It's a new adventure every day.
It is.
And it's a new adventure, and you learn something new every day.
Every single day.
And you mentioned talking about health. I'd be remiss if I didn't sit in front of you and actually ask you a couple of questions about health.
Sure, you need to.
That's why you're here.
Yes.
I look at the state of our health as Black people as it's always different, because we have so many different health issues that stand out from the rest of the population. As a doctor, and not only as a Black doctor, I'm sure you see Black people, white people, whatever, but when you see us come in this room, what are some of the most pressing things that we need to work on in terms of our health? And then I'll bring it back to a point that was made when the last time I talked to you, because there's something else on that end that I really want to get to too.
I would say the biggest thing is honestly making sure that we are seeing the doctor regularly. I think that's the start to really everything. Sometimes I do see patients who only come in when they're sick, or they only come in once every year or a year and a half, or maybe they know they're supposed to come in every 3 or 4 months for diabetes checks and things like that, and it doesn't quite happen. I would say the first thing, and this is honestly not just for Black patients and Black people, but I would say this is for everything, but especially as an African American woman. I mean, I have a vested interest in my people, and in my patients, I see my own family. I see my aunts and uncles and grandparents in my patients. So it's really important to me. I'd say getting to the doctor is one of the most important things. I would say something else I think is really important is that sometimes I see ideas about health that are not entirely beneficial. I
think I know where you're going, and that's actually kind of the second part of it. There's, in the Black community, for those who are probably listening, most of my listeners are Black anyway, so y'all probably know where I'm going with this. There are misconceptions about doctors and our health. Some of that is based on historical issues like the Tuskegee experiments, and that has lingered, and the stuff going back to slavery and everything else. Right. But then there are a lot of misconceptions, conspiracy theories, all this weird, there's weird stuff out there too. As a doctor, who's someone who sees this firsthand, how do you handle it if you run into a patient who doesn't trust doctors? Because I know a few brothers who need to be in a doctor's office who refuse to go to doctors. I can't trust them. I can't trust them. But about the Tuskegee, especially, like the only only lesson they ever picked up in a history class is Tuskegee, and they stick to that. What do you say when you? Because I'm sure you've run into a few of them.
I do, and I would say that things like Tuskegee, and there are very likely a whole lot of other things going on that we do and don't know about. I understand the skepticism that many people and many of us have. I understand it. I think where I try to go with my patients or people that I'm trying to encourage to get to the doctor is that what I think we need to do is to never forget, but to move forward in a way that allows us to take advantage of the greatest and some of the best medicine and health options and treatments that are out there. The bottom line is there is a lot of great medicine happening, and what has happened in the past doesn't mean it's necessarily going to happen in the future. In fact, I think it's important to talk about this so that it doesn't happen in the future. So again, I keep going back to that because I think it's really important to validate and to really sort of establish, no, I'm with you. I'm right there with you. But the thing about it is we have fantastic doctors. We have fantastic Black doctors and non-Black doctors. We have state-of-the-art medical care. And what I say is if you're blessed enough to have insurance, take advantage of that to really live health to your best and to your brightest and to your best ability. I also say when it comes to finding a healthcare provider, and I think a lot of this has to do with how we as doctors are with our patients. We have a role and a responsibility with this ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. I see patients who are skeptical whether they're Black or not all the time. It's not just Black people that are skeptical. There's all sorts of people that are. And what I think of it as my duty as a physician is to help my patients feel as most comfortable as they possibly can, to meet you where you're at and to be a partner with your healthcare, not a boss, not a this paternalistic model where I'm telling you you must or else, but really that we're partners. So what I would encourage for those who are out there who's listening to this saying, yeah, I don't know about these doctors. Hey, I hear you. You're not alone. But this is why it's especially important for you, maybe not even as important to other people, to find the right doctor. The right doctor who understands how you feel, respects how you feel, and works with you where you're at. Because I'll tell you one thing, there's nothing worse as a physician than seeing a patient develop breast cancer because they didn't get mammograms, or see them get colon cancer because they didn't get colonoscopies, or see them have a foot amputated or have them go into kidney failure because they never got treated for their diabetes. There is no reason for that. So whatever issues you have, what I say is I respect them and I hear them. What we have to do is find the right situation for you.
And when I see other doctors, I know a few doctors, and kind of the same fear is that more often than not, it's not even that people are simply not healthy enough to battle through something. It's that sometimes they just don't know because they just don't go to the doctor.
Right. That's exactly right, because they don't go.
And you don't go to the doctor. And yeah, I mean, yeah, there's issues with, that's another conversation altogether, with healthcare costs and everything else. And and those are valid concerns. But some of the simplest things are, because I've gotten on my dad about this and my dad's almost 70 years old. You wouldn't know from looking at him, but he's almost 70 years old. Now we have to get on him. It's like, no, you listen to the doctor when he says, don't take this. Or my mom has had surgery recently on her back, and we had to be on her about, no, the doctor told you don't do this. Right. Then just hang tight, because she wants to keep moving. And she wants to keep moving. And it's like, well, if you try to move now, you won't be moving at all. And it's trying to get people to understand the importance of taking care of their health. I'm someone I'm almost 40 years old, and I already know that I'm going to be in the position of having to I've already had to work harder to get into better shape just in the last 3-4 years. If you're talking to people who are closer to our age and you're 30s, close to 40 years old, what do we need to do better? Because I'll use myself as an example. I'm 6 foot, about 205, 210 pounds, which is more than I've probably been most of my life. I was usually around 175, 180. So as I've gotten older, it's been tougher. Yeah. If you're trying to lose weight, you're trying to get back into shape and stay a little bit more active. I've got a bottle of water sitting here off to the side because that's a thing for me. But I know there's more that we can do. So if I or someone else out there, we're showing up at our high school reunions and we're a lot more overweight than we were when we were playing football or baseball. Sure. What do we need to do better as we get older? Not just black people, but just in general.
In general, yeah. I would say that weight and sort of, obesity, weight loss, things like that are such big topics for so many reasons. I'm a big believer in small changes. I really, really am. I think that, just like I've had some smokers say they've quit smoking by just going cold turkey, I've also had many smokers say it took them many, many tries and small incremental changes to make it work. I think for sometimes diet and weight loss and exercise, that type of thing, often it's a big lifestyle issue for us. And I find, I'll talk about me personally. I think it's very natural for people to go up a little bit up and down with weight. That happens with me. It happens with so many people. But I feel like the small changes make sometimes the biggest differences and helps us be consistent. So with patients, for example, that are trying to lose weight, one of the first things I say is, okay, well, what can you identify that you do or that you eat that is really setting you back? Well, I do like to stop by the such and such and get a bagel with cream cheese every morning. Okay, well, that's what you like. Well, or I do tend to roll through fast food 3 times a week or something, or I eat pizza every Tuesday and Thursday, or whatever your habits are. And what I like to do is starting there. Maybe it's they drink sodas. I had a patient who drank a lot of regular soda. She would drink, it seemed like she'd go through almost a 2-liter bottle almost every day or every 2 days of regular soda. Yeah. And some people buy the cans or what have you. So what we start with and what I recommend is starting by just cutting it down by a 4th or a 3rd. If you're going to, the drive-through and getting your bagel with cream cheese every day of the week, why don't you start doing that only 4 times a week instead of 7, okay? Pick your days when you're gonna go, and then the other days have a plan for a healthier option. And then after a few weeks, go down to 2 or 3 times a week. The idea is making small changes, cutting back that soda from, 10 cans to 8 cans. It sounds crazy, but the idea is you gotta start somewhere. Those little changes make a difference. And the things, I also like those, I like apps a lot. There are a lot of amazing apps. I like MyFitnessPal. For those who are trying to lose weight, Weight Watchers is something, I do not have any affiliations with these companies. I do not make money from them. I do not partner with them. But they are companies that I found that are very helpful with my patients and so many others. And as physicians in this office, we do recommend things like MyFitnessPal, Weight Watchers, and other apps that help people, whether it's Fitbits or other. So use technology and allow it to help you get a few extra steps in the day. Small changes. I always say Rome wasn't built in a day. And the weight gain that we developed also didn't happen overnight. So small changes.
You chip it down every day. You don't try to go in and lose 15 pounds in a month or 2 weeks or that's something absurd like that. Where even how often would you? Because I try to exercise I try to get in the gym at least 3 times a week, depending on the schedule and everything. Maybe 2. Some weeks it might be 4. What is the ideal for say someone in their 30s and you're trying to either get more active or stay active?
Sure. Well, I think there's different ways of quantifying it. In the past we've said 2 to 3 times per week of 30-minute exercise. I tend to be one that I don't like necessarily saying what people should be doing, because I do think it's different for everyone. For that person that maybe has been on the couch all summer, starting a workout plan, maybe I just want them to increase their steps by 1,000 steps every other day. I do think there's different ways to measure activity. So I think what's most important is making sure that you get some activity every single day and figure out the metric that works for you. There's some people who really don't like the gym. I'm not actually a gym person myself. It just doesn't actually make sense for me. I actually have a patient, it's really interesting. She didn't like the gym herself, but she really needed to get in shape, and she loves reality TV. So what she did was, and I don't know how many other people would be willing to change their living room, but she bought a stationary bike and she put it in her living room in front of her TV. So that when she watches her favorite reality shows, she gets on the bike and she pedals. It's a way for her to combine 2 things and get one thing done that she loves and another thing done that she's not crazy about, and kind of keeps it enjoyable for her. So remember, there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat, and I think that sometimes that's one of the biggest motivators and things to help us, is to think outside the box and say, okay, what's going to work for me? Because I don't know, I don't like the gym, or I do like the gym. I like playing basketball. Maybe it's playing basketball and getting out on the court again. So I really want people to think about, okay, the biggest thing is just being active. How can I do that makes me, in a way that makes me happy and want to stick with it?
And I think I can close this out with this question. And just from the amount of time you've done stuff on TV and you've done all these different appearances, I guess my last question will be, what is the best experience you feel you've had, and what was a more forgettable television appearance you might have had? One that even at first it did seem like, oh, this wasn't too bad, and you look back on it and it's like, oh no, that was a problem. Like what were the best and the best and the not so best? I won't say worst, not so best.
No, of course. Well, I would say the best appearances for me are always one where after the fact I hear someone write me on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram and say, hey, I really learned something, or hey, you know what? I'm actually going to get my flu shot this year because of what you said. I'd always been afraid of it. I never wanted to get it, but I think I'm going to do that this year. I'll tell you, nothing warms my heart more than feeling like I've made a difference. That's the best in the world, honestly. I would say some more, forgettable or less desirable appearances, honestly, or I say have to do more with like technical difficulties and things like that. I just did an appearance for HLN, and it was a Skype appearance. This was a couple weeks ago, and the audio, it was I don't know if it was my Wi-Fi or what was going on, but the tracking and the audio went out, and then you couldn't hear me, they couldn't see me, and it's embarrassing when there's technical difficulties.
Oh yeah.
Let me tell you. But there have also been appearances where I've gone on shows expecting to talk about one thing, and then the host sort of bring up a different angle, or maybe an unexpected angle that sometimes makes me feel like, I don't know, I didn't plan on this, or I didn't plan on going down this route. And so sometimes you feel, sometimes it gets a little sticky, but it also is a wonderful challenge as well. I think the best thing about going on so many different networks is being able to do different styles, from going on Fox 29 in Philadelphia and working with those amazing folks to national television, and really sort of having to be flexible. I think that would be it. The hardest is when you're thrown curveballs that you never really expect curveballs, but the curveballs that you really don't expect and maybe you're trying to figure out how to navigate, those are the ones that are sometimes a little bit tougher.
I appreciate you taking your time to talk to me, because I obviously your day is just getting started from what it looks like. How can people find you? They can see you just about everywhere, but how can people find you? How can people reach you if they want to reach out to you on social media, your website? Feel free to give me all the information you got.
Please find me on social media. I really love hearing from folks. I actually do try to write back, and I write back to most people. So, if you write me, I'll do my best to get back to you. So you can visit my website at jennifercaudle.com. That's Jennifer, JENNIFER, But I'm also on Twitter and Instagram, and my link is at Dr. Jen Caudle, DrJenCaudle, and I'm also at Facebook at Dr. Jennifer Caudle, so you can like my page there. I'm on Snapchat and some of the other ones as well, but I would say Facebook, Twitter, Instagram are the main ones that I use. And of course, I post the obligatory selfies as well as the fun shots, the action shots, and the behind the scenes shots. So, so definitely come follow me and write me and say hello.
Dr. Jennifer Caudle, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and coming on JSC Radio with me. Thank you so much for your time. This has been wonderful, and it's interesting that this is maybe the coolest setup I've had to do of any podcast interview I've done is setting up in here. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you.
And there you have it. Another interview in the books. I will say this, for as tumultuous a year as I have had personally and professionally, this podcast has grown by leaps and bounds this year. And it's been due in large part to me being able to somehow finagle the bagel and get some amazing interviews. And you can add Dr. Jennifer Caudle to the list. She gave you her social media information. I will also drop it down there in the description on this podcast. I want to thank Jennifer so much for being so gracious and so giving of her time, especially that day, because she literally started seeing patients the second I got my crap and walked out of her office. She is about that business, and be on the lookout for her. She was just on Dr. Oz the other day talking about alkaline water. She really is out here. My name is J. Scott Smith, telling you to take care of yourself. God bless. Always dare to be different. Always have your pets spayed or neutered. Or neutered. Whichever. Adopt. Don't buy. And we are out of here. So until next time, goodbye, everybody.